This week's episode is brought to you by Unidentified and Alejandro. Thank you, Unidentified and Alejandro. It's with the generous support of listeners just like you that helps keep the torrential flow of prismatic energy coursing through the hydraulic system of our 10-story tall robot bunny that invades highly populated metropolitan areas using asymmetrical subterranean warfare. If you'd like to help support the creation of our mech army, or just hear the second half of this episode, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you instantaneous access to the extended version of this episode, but our entire library of extended episodes in simple RSS feed format compatible with your podcast player of choice. If you're a big spender, $10 will even get you access to our voluminous show notes, which often exceed 20, even 30 pages, and $20 a month will get you a tarot reading from yours truly every single month. In this episode, we explore the CIA's remote viewing program, which employed physicists, biologists, and psychic mediums in an attempt to weaponize the latent human capacity to project awareness to distant places, people, and even planets, regardless of distance, time, or familiarity with the target. We discuss the fruitful partnership between the Stanford Research Institute, the U.S. military and intelligence organizations at the highest level as they performed a menagerie of wacky experiments in the field of psychic activity, eventually utilizing it with great success in covert, top-secret operations to collect intelligence against the Soviets. We open the discussion by exploring the shadowy Nazi origins of psychotronic warfare, before talking about key players in the 70s like Kit Green, Russell Targ, Jon McMoneagle, and even celebrities like the spoon-bending Uri Geller's involvement with the United States remote viewing program. In the extended episode, we even touch upon the spooky overlap between remote viewing innovators like Hal Puthoff, Ingo Swan, and Pat Price's little-known affiliation with the Church of Scientology. By the end of this episode, you may even want to go in for some auditing yourself. Thank you, and enjoy the show.
Yeah?
Mari, where have you been?
I went to Tinkle, Jesus Christ.
No, not now. The past couple episodes.
Oh, I went to the beach.
What did you learn from the kangaroo people?
There are no kangaroo people at the beach.
Lies! Yes, there are. There's kangaroo people. They taught you kung fu. Now we want the secrets.
Maybe you're thinking of another Mari, because...
Mari and her furry friends have been hacking states, and we all know that's what you've been up to, Mari.
I didn't do it.
That's pretty cool, though.
Dude, what kind of welcome back is that?
Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Whole Rabbit, where we do more than just tell you the U.S. Department of Defense specifically employs secret agents possessed of superhuman levels of psychic ability and uses them to spy behind enemy lines, dominate the minds of diplomats, and locate crash aircraft. Nay, we furnish recently declassified CIA documents to prove it, and give you the inside scoop of exactly how the agents of Project Stargate projected their minds instantly across vast distances of space and time to perform phenomena mainstream science would like to pretend was totally impossible, because this week we're discussing the CIA's secret remote viewing program, the agents who participated in it, and maybe even how you could do it yourself. I'm your host, Luke Madrid, the Hack Rabbit. I'm joined this week by the Merlin of memes, Mari Sama.
Bippity boppity boo, bitch.
The persecutor of the pious, Malachor 5.
Salutations.
And the hotness of the Higgs field, Heka Astra.
Hello.
This week, we are joined once again by the illustrious host and creator of the Cryptic Chronicles podcast, the mysterious Mr. Tim Hacker, who manifested from the plane of demigods to help us write the main body of the show this week and get us talking about how to spy on your friends and coworkers for fun and profit using nothing but your noodle. Thank you and welcome to the show, Mr. Tim Hacker.
Hi, I'm glad to be here.
Please make sure to check out crypticchronicles.com.
Welcome back, Tim.
Hello.
Isn't it pretty great that we pay taxes for psychic research?
Woohoo!
I mean, it's a little bit better than paying David Miscavige for it.
That's true.
He'll just jump over a desk and punch you in the face until you become psychic.
Usually the best call.
You gotta beat the Thetans out somehow.
All right, so before we begin, what exactly is remote viewing?
Remote viewing is where some guy with a big, bushy head of hair and thick glasses named Russell Targ sits you down and tells you some coordinates. And then the first thing that pops into your mind, you either start drawing it or saying it out loud. And while trying not to guess what it is you're seeing, you just describe what it is you're envisioning in your mind's eye. And then they take that information that you wrote down or said out loud and compare it against what they know your quote unquote target was. And supposedly, depending on the person who's viewing and the person who's doing the testing, you can use psychic ability to remotely spy on or view any object, person, or situation, both in real time or in the past or the future.
It sounds like potentially every object that exists has like a Twitch stream, live stream going at all times, and remote viewing is the technique of finding their channel and watching.
Psychically.
It's essentially using your mind's eye, not your physical eyeballs, to view something remotely that may or may not be right in front of you, sealed in an envelope, or on the other side of the planet, or wherever. So you're remotely viewing with your mind's eye a subject.
From what I understand, the hard part is not allowing your conscious mind to interfere and begin making guesses or assumptions about what you're looking at. You have to be like clean and totally going with the flow in order to get accurate results, which some people are better at than others. And if the information that we're presenting today is in any way true, it was successful enough in some cases to use for intelligence purposes.
And to see like stuff in space too, which is kind of cool.
I mean, anyone who's taken mushrooms knows that.
But we'll get to that. The secret history of the federal government's investigation into esoteric phenomena is a fascinating deep dive into the obfuscated nature of deep state black book projects. Secretive groups within the government have investigated mental telepathy, clairvoyance, and precognition for many decades. Allegedly, this sort of research is for defense. But, unless you're totally naive, things are rarely, if ever, what they seem. When it comes to the ruling class and government, what they say is rarely what actually is. In fact, if one trusts the government, it just shows that they are a poor student of history.
What are you talking about, Tim? The government and military would never lie to us.
What's hilarious is during the early era of federal research into psychotronic warfare, the government and press would openly mock anyone who showed interest in ESP or other psychic faculties, all the while giving science fiction a run for its money, because the CIA and Defense Department, in truth, had become laser focused on understanding the paranormal and its potential applications in war. Uncountable levels of taxpayer funds were thrown at investigating extrasensory perception, as well as other more mystical arts, including psychokinesis, telepathy, and remote viewing. This was the time of spoon benders and psychic soldiers, all to counter what allegedly our Cold War counterparts were also conducting over in the communist regime of the Soviet Union. Many whistleblowers have stepped forth to tell the public about this intriguing secret history over the years, including Hal Puthoff, a physicist and former program director of the Stanford Research Institute, where he led programs researching remote viewing for the Department of Defense and U.S. intelligence agencies. Another famous whistleblower is Gail Hayson, the president and CEO of electrodynamics firm EarthTech International. But there are many, many more who came forth about the shadowy experiments they were brought on to conduct for the U.S. government. Many skeptics laugh and talk smugly about phenomena like remote viewing, but it's essential to be able to distinguish legitimate skepticism from pseudo-skepticism. Pseudo-skepticism arises from groupthink, indoctrination, and closed-mindedness. It is more of a belief structure, similar to religion, where information is not even acknowledged or looked at, much less analyzed through reason and logic. On the other hand, real skeptics are open-minded and able to change their views based on new information. As such, concerning topics like government-funded remote viewing projects, we can easily dismiss the dogma of pseudo-skeptics in the same way that they dismiss the facts which clearly support its continued use and funding over 2 decades.
This is one thing I like about the topic, is that there are declassified CIA documents that we have access to now, which show that while the government and military are full of skeptics, they produced accurate enough results to continue their funding and research, like well into the 90s.
Yeah, we're talking like decades and decades and decades. And at the same time, you got to understand too that what they want you to think is usually the opposite of what is.
And what makes it interesting is that the people that were interested in the research were skeptics themselves, but they also wanted to use ESP to get an advantage. So they speak about it very practically, which is what makes the documents so fun to read.
Right. I don't think we're going to get to this, but there's an amount of ethics to these techniques. And I think the effectiveness relies on why and what you're actually doing and what you're spying on. So I feel like their statements about this stuff being hocus pocus is based on them not having a lot of like game-changing war moves that were in their advantage. I don't think this is the way this power or these techniques really work, though they might be able to do that. I'm not going to rule that out either. I'm just going to say I'm a bit of a skeptic, but I've had experiences that are similar to these techniques that I've willingly and unwillingly have experienced. And at the end of the day, I'm trying to find how to explain all this stuff in a objective manner.
Well, being a skeptic is good. It's being a pseudo-skeptic, which is bad. That's just dogma. That's just, I don't believe it no matter what you show me. I'm not even going to look at any evidence you got. That's a pseudo-skeptic. A skeptic should question everything. And it doesn't mean that he won't believe it if he comes across information that changes his views. But it's actually just like reason and intelligence that being a skeptic is.
That really is like the difference is that a skeptic will ask the questions to gain a deeper understanding, whereas someone who is a pseudo-skeptic doesn't want to even bother asking the questions. They're going to write it off right away. And some of the questions that are going to be asked by a skeptic is like, what are the motives for either searching or for covering up or any of these other things? They're asking questions. That's the difference.
Yeah, a pseudo-skeptic wouldn't even have an honest conversation in the first place. They'd probably just call you names.
I mean, I'm willing to step into the realm of like, okay, this stuff is real. Why are you spying on me? Like, that's violating some sort of like privacy. I don't think we're going to get to that sort of topic, but I just wanted to bring it up.
We want to see if you have the missing chonies with the Horn of Plenty on it.
That's all.
Like anything, it just comes down to the golden rule. In what are now declassified CIA documents, much legitimate evidence suggests the existence of mystical abilities like ESP. 50 years ago in Vietnam, Jon McMoneagle used sixth sense abilities to keep himself and his fellow soldiers safe. He used his bizarre gut feeling to avoid stepping on booby traps, falling into punji pits, and walking into enemy ambushes. His paranormal ability to foresee danger was not lost on his fellow soldiers, and many in the US military, even today, will say that they believe in a sixth sense as well. Well, the ones that see combat, at least.
Now, Jon McMoneagle is quite the character. His older photos make him look like he's the sort of super duper American soldier that Japanese anime would want you to imagine. He retired well decorated and is quite passionate when he claims that his unit's ability to produce reliable psychic intelligence is what kept his unit alive for 4 administrations and continued to see regular renewal of their yearly funding. Although his work in the Army's remote viewing program was the culmination of decades of research.
But when did the research into paranormal phenomena by the government begin? You may be wondering this. And, well, it started back in the 50s with the Red Scare.
What's the Red Scare?
It's the Cold War, the propaganda and the fear associated with the Russians and communism in general.
Nuke apocalypse.
Oh, yeah, I remember those. My mom talked about that they did nuclear bomb drills in school when she was a little girl.
Well, the idea is that there's a certain percentage of people that are susceptible to defecting if you give them enough money or enough motivation, or maybe if they just have long hair and smoke enough weed, they may be sympathetic to the Soviets. And the fear is that these folks had infiltrated government, the media, and industry. And it culminated with, I believe it was a senator named McCarthy who held all these congressional trials of like innocent people and tried to pretty much go on a witch hunt and condemn anyone he could point his finger at as being a communist, which became a real problem.
I'd like to put something in context here. If you consider the time frame that the Cold War happened and this whole Red Scare thing is going on, whoever won this media war, we're talking like they were funding Andy Warhol and the hippie movement on our side, you know, funding intense counterculture art programs where the Russians were like creating fine arts in the painting world on the other end. Like Russian artists are very realistic and very beautiful in their, you know, traditional artworks. They stuck to like a standard. And anyway, what I'm trying to say here is that technology in these decades, whoever grasped the top reins of these industries and these technologies, and you're going to become the new leader of the world. And it's safe to say that the West won and America became a titan unlike anything else the world has seen in such a short amount of time in history for its age.
And so it was reasonable to suspect that there were spies and leakers and saboteurs running around the United States. And in response, the FBI and the CIA had people deeply embedded all over to try and suss them out. It was like spy versus spy constantly. By the 1970s, in fact, the United States intelligence sources had come to believe the Soviets were spending 60 million rubles annually on psychotronic research, and were also rumored to have been highly successful. So the United States was pretty freaking sure, based on its intelligence, that the Soviets were perfecting psychic research and spying on us remotely. In response, the CIA immediately initiated funding for a new program known as Scanate, or Scan by Coordinate, which culminated in research being launched at the Stanford Research Institute in 1972 in Menlo Park, California.
Who is the Stanford Research Institute anyway?
Funny you would ask, Tim. The Stanford Research Institute, or SRI, actually began in 1946 after numerous failed attempts to exist, with one of its early proponents including Herbert Hoover prior to becoming a US president. Although originally, the idealistic minds of Stanford University wanted its inventions to benefit all mankind, SRI has mostly been used to advance projects funded by the US government and military, with its first project being aimed at producing a domestically available form of natural rubber, which was prone to shortage and rationing during World War II. SRI's first economic study was done at the direction of the US Air Force in 1947 to assess the expansion potential of the US aerospace industry's ability to meet production needs during an emergency, which SRI determined it would not. The fact that this study coincided with the rapid appearance of UFOs over classified airspace is probably just a coincidence.
Totally a coincidence.
They go to Stanford to hey, smart guys, let's say we had a bunch of space invaders. Would we be able to, stop them? And they're like, no.
Nah, fam.
In 1948, Chevron asked SRI to research a synthetic substance capable of replacing tallow and coconut oil, which led to the creation of Tide laundry detergent.
Don't eat that.
The trials that they did eating the Tide Pods came out very poorly, apparently. In 1953, Walt Disney asked SRI to help consult on his proposal for building Disneyland in Burbank, California, but they convinced him that Anaheim would be a much better idea and remained operating in an advisory role as the project expanded. Today, SRI's best-known success is Siri, the iPhone's personal assistant, which SRI sold to Apple in 2010.
Well, what?
Oh, that makes sense about the name then.
Although Apple had been dreaming of a digital personal assistant since 1987, the Siri we know today began as a project in 2003 initiated by the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA for short. This project was codenamed CALO, which is a Latin word meaning soldier's assistant, under its Personalized Assistant That Learns program, or PAL for short. This is just one example of how SRI and the US government have a long-standing relationship of working together to make science fiction into science fact.
This is crazy. I had no idea, but also somehow I'm not surprised.
I mean, the internet was invented the same way. It was made first for the secret programs of the military communication, and then it was released. This happens with a lot of technology that we have. We have it 150 years in advance, but it slowly trickles out into the market, I guess.
That's one reason that I believe the moon landings probably did happen, but it's also likely we faked the footage for it, and then that leaves me somewhere in the middle with no one to listen to me. Boo-hoo.
I'm in the same boat as you.
I could believe either way.
We got diapers and fire detectors out of it. Anyway, it was here at SRI, under the direction of its researchers like Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff, that remote viewing was made into a practical tool that the US military and intelligence assets would utilize time and time again.
Allegedly, the function of this research was to conduct counteroffensive to America's enemies, which is the job of the Department of Defense and CIA. However, this time was also the rise of the military-industrial complex, where war is power and profit. So it could be a what came first, the chicken or the egg kind of a deal. And though the government research into the paranormal began in the 50s, it's traced as being an ongoing thing all the way up to the 90s, when the research goes silent through obfuscation. Pseudo-skeptics will say it goes quiet after the 90s because they realized it was all dumb and didn't work. And that's precisely what the powers that be want you to think.
If you believe Russell Targ's documentary, one of our primary sources, Third Eye Spies, the case is made that it was likely Jimmy Carter who spilled the beans during a graduation speech, which resulted in the programs people knew about being scrubbed and new ones being reformed in secret. After all, military research and application goes all the way back to World War II. Prior to the United States CIA becoming interested in psychic warfare, it seems worth mentioning that the Nazis in World War II employed people like Ludwig Stranick, a mystic, astrologer, and architect, to divine the location of submarines for the German Navy using dowsing rods and pendulums, which Stranick claimed to have a gift for using. According to legend, Ludwig landed the gig, perhaps against his will, after successfully locating the pocket battleship Prince Eugen while it was on a secret mission off the coast of Norway. Straniak would go on to become a member of the Nazis' Institute for Occult Warfare, which employed psychics, mediums, dowsers, and occultists to gain a tactical advantage during the war.
It's stuff like this that shows up in Metal Gear Solid, like this whole industrial military complex and arms race on the psychic front. Hideo Kojima implemented into Metal Gear Solid.
I used to think it was a bit silly, but then when I went back and did the research for the stuff, I was like, oh.
Yep, military-industrial complex and the banksters. They're basically behind everything. Anyway, when the Nazis were defeated in 1945, an elite U.S. scientific intelligence initiative called Operation Alsos swooped through Berlin to grab all possible German military projects. They discovered a cache of documents and artifacts that were part of the Ahnenerbe, which was Heinrich Himmler's science organization that had immense funding from Hitler. And by much funding, I mean vast. Like the Black Book projects funded by taxpayers in the U.S. that never see the light of day. Vast. An entire branch of this organization was dedicated to occult sciences. The organization scoured the globe for occult artifacts and deeply researched mystical powers, like remote viewing.
This was the same group, Ahnenerbe, that went trouncing through South France looking for the Holy Grail in old Cathar castles.
In the book Phenomena, one of our primary sources for this rabbit hole, author Annie Jacobson says the following.
In that organization, there was ESP, psychokinesis, map dowsing, an element of what you could say was the supernatural or the paranormal. Jacobson says, in the villa's basement, the researchers found remnants of Teutonic symbols and rites, as well as a baby skull in a corner pit of ashes.
Whoa.
She goes on to say, we later learned that the Soviets had captured an equal probe of information on this same subject, and when we learned that they were working in this area, you could say that this is the origin of the psychic arms race.
So both the Soviets and the United States got a hold of Nazi documents, and they're like, hey, they're using psychic stuff. We can use psychic stuff.
With the Soviets gaining a hoard of documents on the research by Himmler's Ahnenerbe, the U.S. military began a deep dive into paranormal lore.
If you're curious exactly what that lore was, just watch the Avengers films.
The Captain America Winter Soldier one, especially.
Winter Soldier, oh my God. As you might imagine, quite a bit of Nazi research consisted of mind control techniques, which were imported into the United States through the late OSS and early CIA's MK-Ultra program.
The U.S. thought that the Soviets' ability to master mind control before them was a real existential threat to America, with the Cold War arms race spilling over into many bizarre esoteric categories. This fear was not unjustified, not only because the Soviets also had caches of Nazi research, but because of the propaganda put out by the communists of captured Americans displaying brainwashed behavior.
Stalin is good. Lenin is great. Only together can we stop the hate. Now get back to work!
No complaining about starving. But there was also tons of other propaganda that gave the U.S. military shivers, such as the stories about decorated World War II hero Nino Kulagina, who was the Soviet Union's top psychic and was said to be able to stop an animal's heart, killing it with her power of psychokinesis.
Now they just spike your orange juice with plutonium.
Lols. In the early days, both the US and the Soviets relied heavily on the caches of Nazi research they received. Some of the research consisted of experiments on victims in concentration camps, where Nazi scientists pushed human physiology and mental capacity to immense extremes beyond anything ever done before, and heavily monitored the results.
It wasn't even solely the Nazis that were doing strange, horrific, or borderline experiments on prisoners of war. The Japanese Unit 731 conducted a massive amount of what are arguably some of the most heinous, lethal, chemical, and biological experiments during World War II as well. And guess who benefited from procuring all their research data post-war? The United States of America! And the US promptly made plenty of medical advances based on the research that they recovered for the greater good, of course, only.
I think, sadly, a big portion of what we knew about the different stages of pregnancy came from some of those awful experiments that the Nazis did. So we used that information as much as we could.
And imported all the scientists that did it.
I mean, I was talking about the Japanese experiments specifically, but because the Nazis weren't the only ones that were doing it.
Quote, now the CIA and KGB would conduct similar experiments, each side arguing that the other side's program required countermeasures to defend against them, Jacobson says in her book Phenomena.
So, one such experiment from 1956 that was done by the Russian military was commented on in reports belonging to the United States DIA of the 1970s. In these reports, they described one Russian experiment that was coordinated by Russian Dr. Pavel Naumov. And in this experiment, they used a mother rabbit and her litter of baby rabbits to study psychic connections. So they took the baby rabbits onto a submarine and they kept the mother rabbit in an onshore laboratory where they fitted the mother with electrodes implanted in her brain. On board the submarine, they killed the baby rabbits one by one. And at each point of execution, they detected and recorded clear reactions in the brain of the mother rabbit that was on shore. According to the DIA, these kinds of experiments were commonplace in intelligence program research, such as this, utilizing animals like rabbits, dogs, and primates for experimental studies into psychic phenomena like astral projection, remote viewing, ESP, and even possible proof of the existence of a soul.
If you want to crush the human spirit, you got to prove it exists first, right?
Quote, while they were looking into mind research and how to input behavior, the MK Ultra sub-project 58 became significant, which is the program to use drugs, which they call psychopharmacology, to enhance the psychic functioning in psychic people. It's a real jumping off point for understanding how and why this race against the Soviets began and why it's legitimate in many ways. End quote. The Soviet Union and the US government would point fingers at one another's research into mind control, claiming that it was to counter the other's research and militarize psychic phenomena. There are tales of bizarre psychic warfare in the early days, such as the US putting telepaths on nuclear submarines and the Soviets having mind control rays.
If you're familiar with Philip K. Dick's work, especially Valis, he considered his theophany a possible result of a Soviet mind control satellite experimenting on him.
Isn't this also the era of the development of the truth serum? MK Ultra included LSD in their experiments as well.
Yes.
The truth serum would definitely fall under the psychopharmacology experiments.
Yeah, for sure.
Despite how silly many of the rumors and propaganda were at this time, the disinformation campaigns kicked up to a heated level, which the US government would get really good at, and are now objective masters of it today. But with each one of these rumors and pieces of propaganda slightly based on actual facts, the psychic arms race picked up speed big time.
So according to a declassified CIA document by Kenneth A. Kress titled Parapsychology in Intelligence, reports regarding possible military uses of ESP started accumulating especially around 1951, inducing one of the earliest U.S. government parapsychology investigations by the chief of the CIA's Technical Services Division. The sanitized copy of this 1977 document specifically was more recently approved for release by the CIA in 2011, and it's still available on the CIA.gov website if you guys ever want to check it out. Its author, Kenneth A. Kress, was involved in many of the CIA operations involved with parapsychological-based intelligence collection, including the experiments that were done at SRI.
If you Google remote viewing, some of the results you'll get are from CIA.gov. It's pretty cool.
So the approved for release document states that by 1952, the Department of Defense was lectured about the possible usefulness of extrasensory perception in psychological warfare. Project officers of this division then contacted the director of the Parapsychological Laboratory at Oxford University, England, Stephen Abrams. Regarding studies conducted by Stephen Abrams, the document states that in 1965, Abrams, operating under the auspices of Project Ultra, prepared a review article which claimed that ESP was demonstrated but not understood or controllable. The next obvious step would have been to find a way to control it so it could be used for intelligence gathering purposes.
In the 1970s, the Department of Defense was conducting research specifically into the act of remote viewing. This remote viewing program revolved around the lore concerning a mystical ability someone can use to visualize details of distant people and objects through telekinesis. In fact, there would be many government programs researching psychic phenomena, and the duties revolving around this research would be thrown back and forth between the Department of Defense and the CIA, with programs being shut down and then reopened under different names time and time again. The most famous would be movie Project Stargate with Ingo Swan, but we'll get to that in a bit.
This is a good example of how military defense and intelligence use the shell organizations to obscure what it's researching to the public while tapping into academia and the private sector to produce results. While the CIA began funding SRI's research, they would eventually commandeer the operation before being taken over by Army intelligence and later the Defense Intelligence Agency. This is one reason each incarnation of the project was uniquely different and why it was given so many different names.
One of the places they used for their experiments was a building located at Fort George Meade Army Facility in Fort Meade, Maryland, and another operation was going on at the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, which employed a secretary named Rosemary Smith, who believed herself to be a psychic. Quote, "It was a very small budget program because most people thought it was bananas." End quote.
Bananas!
Cool.
So you mentioned the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and if I'm not mistaken, this is still a location that they use today for psychological operation training in the military.
Yes.
The location for experiments would change in times of emergency and missions. For example, in 1976, they were given the task of finding a downed American pilot through remote viewing. Quote,
A Soviet bomber had gone down in the jungles of Africa, and the CIA and military intelligence had used every intelligence connection means available to them, from satellite technology to signal intelligence to human intelligence, and they had absolutely nothing.
with nothing to lose, the military contacted the remote viewing operation at Patterson, and they put the secretary, Rosemary Smith, on the job, and she was able to draw maps that pinpointed where the aircraft was, within a few miles. The cable was sent to the CIA, and they sent a paramilitary team out into the jungle, and near the area where Rosemary Smith said it would be, they saw a villager carrying a piece of the aircraft out of the jungle, and that led them to the downed aircraft.
Awesome.
This was a paradigm-shattering event, because it would go on to be one of the most successful documented events of a psychic using remote viewing to great effect that the military could touch and feel. And by that I mean objective evidence of a successful remote viewing.
So prior to this event, just 4 years earlier in 1972, the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency actually included the following statement in a report titled Controlled Offensive Behavior, USSR. It says, quote, "Before the end of the 1970s, Soviet diplomats will be able to sit in their foreign embassies and use ESP to steal the secrets of their enemies. A spy would be hypnotized, then his invisible spirit would be ordered to leave his body, travel across barriers of space and time to a foreign government security facility, and there read top secret documents and relay back their information. The Soviets are at least 25 years ahead of the US in psychic research and have realized the immense military advantage of the psychic ability known as astral projection, out-of-body travel." End quote.
In the 1960s, metaphysics became popular among physicists. At the Stanford Research Institute, Hal Puthoff, a physicist who was an expert in quantum electronics and electron beam devices, began some very interesting research in 1972. Harold Puthoff was interested in questions like, what is life? Why is life?
What is love?
Baby, don't hurt me no more.
Because there was no theory, as he knew, that could describe life processes, his thinking led him to want to attain a grant for research into quantum biology. He worked for the country's second largest Defense Department research facility, located at the heart of Silicon Valley in Northern California. SRI was a big deal, and Puthoff had heavy hitters backing him up. He had also worked for U.S. Navy intelligence before his time as a scientist, and as a Navy lieutenant, he was loaned out to the NSA.
As someone who doesn't live in America, I'm a bit of a fish out of water here. The NSA is the National Security Association in the U.S., right?
National Security Agency, which operates on the federal level under the Department of Defense. It was founded under Harry Truman and was originally so classified a secret that NSA was referred to colloquially as no such agency. These were the sorts of circles that Harold ran in.
Although Puthoff was a scientist, he was no stranger to top secret government work. His passion was quantum physics and esoteric concepts like quantum entanglement, zero-point energy, and how quantum theory might account for biological life processes. Hence his question, why is life? And his fascination with quantum biology. Precisely what he wanted to know more about was the elusive idea of tachyon particles.
Okay, can we just pause and appreciate my passion is quantum physics? That's the cutest thing I've ever heard.
So my ears definitely perked up because I'm in the same boat as Mari. This is the good stuff, the juicy, meaty flesh that's underneath it all. Because tachyon particles are hypothetical antimass particles, which came to light, pun intended, in the 1960s related to Einstein's theory of special relativity. So they're believed to move faster than the speed of light and even possess the ability to move in reverse through time. Puthoff's highly specialized interest was in these hypothetical particles that function according to a quantum field. So as such, they aren't subject to the universal speed limit of the speed of light as an understood consequence of spacetime. So with normal matter, when energy is added to particles, they speed up. But with tachyon particles, they would speed up when energy decreased and would never be able to slow down to slower than light speeds. So it's kind of like an inversion of the universal speed limit, but with them never being capable of going slower than light or subliminal speeds. So this is the stuff of interest for topics like potential time travel and what you could call warp speed or faster than light travel, operating outside of the constrictions of space-time, but with the possibility of interacting with the matter that's within space-time. So I could see how this specialized interest that Harold Puthoff had could be related to psychic phenomena, where a vivid form of communication is seemingly teleported or beamed into your head.
All the stuff that's in Star Wars was currently being researched by these folks.
Puthoff wrote a letter to a man named Cleve Baxter, who was an infamous CIA analyst specializing in deception. Puthoff thought that Baxter's experiments with plants could have some sort of connection to tachyon particles. The Baxter effect and Baxter's book, The Secret Life of Plants, would go down in history as a notoriously reviled work of research by establishment science. Baxter's experiments showed plants have a form of communication analogous to ESP and could show pain and fear. And the reason why it pissed off a lot of scientists is since plants have no nervous system, it just didn't make sense.
They scream by releasing chemicals.
So this whole bundle of research that Cleve Baxter did with The Secret Life of Plants, it's a really awesome bundle of research to look into. And I personally think it could be its own show. I highly suggest looking into it if any listeners have an interest in that.
A lot of propaganda about that. But yes, it is insanely interesting.
Well, there's still experiments going on today as well that are in line with their findings, which I think is fascinating.
If you talk to plants, apparently they grow better. And it also depends on the type of tone that you use and the speech that you use. So it could be something.
Mythbusters found out that plants grew faster in death metal environments than any other type of music.
What?
They did. I saw that episode.
Well, you know what's weird though is that I found out because I used to hate metal and then I got into it. And I'm like, okay, but there's a lot of mathematical theory. Like there's music theory in metal and it sounds like a concerto or something like that, but it's actually a little bit louder.
Well, the things that all of these experiments have in common is a kind of quantum method of communication going on.
Ah, indeed. Puthoff
Listen.
thought that tachyon particles could be how plants feel pain or express this anomalous communication through analogous ESP. But by the time his letter reached Baxter, he had already moved on to human and plant psychic experiments. And his test subject was, guess what, a man named Ingo Swan.
Whoa.
Ingo Swan.
You probably heard of him.
He's like the dude.
Yeah.
Ingo Swan had a fascinating backstory, too. He was considered basically a weirdo all of his life and an outsider. Swan claimed to experience premonitions and that he could see people's auras. He said he could go into a dream state and leave his body, traveling far and wide. Astral projection. His maternal grandmother also claimed to be a quote-unquote sensitive, and his family supported his metaphysical path. In 1955, he graduated college with a double major in biology and art. Swan wanted to become a scientist and get a degree in genetic research. However, he ended up enlisting in the U.S. Army instead. Weird life choice, right, for what he was interested in. He served 3 years in Korea, but eventually left the Army in 1958 and moved to New York City. He was determined to make a living as an artist, but since he had to pay the bills, he took a day job as a clerk at the Office of the United Nations as a secretary. Swan did this for 12 years, and he hated every second of it. But at night and on weekends, he was dedicated to art and was immersed in the New York City art scene. and this is where he met a legendary artist named Buell Mullen. She was a high society type and walked in a crowd of powerful and influential people in New York. Since one of her favorite topics was psychic phenomena, the two had a lot to talk about and got along real quick and easily. At one of Mullen's parties, Swan met Cleve Baxter, the same Baxter that I just mentioned earlier with the plant ESP experiments. The two liked each other and hit it off nicely, with Swan eventually asking if he could visit Cleve Baxter at his lab. Swan would later recall in an unpublished biography that he wanted to see how many plants react to human thoughts in a laboratory environment. Swan wanted to sell himself out as a psychic guinea pig so he could quit his day job and focus on his art.
Yeah, who wouldn't? You're a secretary at the United Nations. Get me out!
Yeah, might as well do something with what's actually you're passionate and interested in to make money, right?
I'm a psychic. Plug me into the machine. I will tell you if the chonies in the future have the Horn of Plenty or not.
And Ingo Swan would basically revolutionize remote viewing as well as psychic research in general. He worked well with Baxter, and eventually Baxter told him about Puthoff's letter to him regarding tachyon particles and this analogous ESP communication with plants. So now we have come full circle, and the holy trinity of psychic research, Ingo, Baxter, and Puthoff, were united. This research done at Stanford Research Institute would become legendary. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Ingo became New York's super psychic and pioneered remote viewing, out-of-body experiences, and other myriad paranormal research. In collaboration with the CIA and U.S. Army, Swan took front stage in 1978 during the SRI Project Stargate, which focused specifically on investigating psychic phenomena. On one Stargate mission, Ingo and his team of researchers used remote viewing to spy on Russia from their base in Palo Alto, California, and even discovered a downed Soviet spy plane hidden under the foliage of the jungle in Africa, and even discovered a downed Soviet spy plane that was hidden under foliage of the jungle in Africa after the Department of Defense gave up on tracking it down. Puthoff and Swan conducted their experiments with the tightest scrutiny, and room for error was basically all but removed to the best of everyone's abilities. Their work at SRI drew the attention of Puthoff's colleagues, who greatly disapproved of the experiments. Puthoff, however, believed that he had the technology and the abilities to research psychic phenomena with scientific accuracy, and dismissed his colleagues that looked down on his work.
This is where I say it seems worth mentioning that both Harold Puthoff and Ingo Swan were well-established Scientologists.
Dude, what?
Yeah. In the case of Harold Puthoff, he was known to have achieved the highest level of attainment available to Scientologists, which at the time was OT8. From what I understand, they're still releasing endgame content in Scientology, but this was like the heyday when it was still really fun, like Warcraft Classic.
It seems like it's more like DLC.
Yeah, Miscavige pretty much invented DLC for your brain. It's just not as good as the original stuff, I guess, that LRH came up with. Now, in the case of Ingo Swan, he actually attributed his ability in remote viewing to Scientology's process of auditing, becoming easily accessible after achieving OT3. The following is an excerpt quoted from an interview with Ingo Swan. The interviewer asks,
How did these abilities develop in relationship to your auditing on the OT levels?
he said, they are solely the result of auditing, not particularly even the OT levels. I had extremely good gains from lower grades, and some had developed certainly by the time power processing took place. But steady control over them, the control I have now, which is not perfect by the way, occurred after the completion of OT3, and is even better now than when I finished OT7. So they are solely the result of auditing.
What does OT stand for again?
Operating Thetan. Now, as a non-Scientologist, from what I understand, the idea of Thetans is related somewhat to the third book of the law, where the book of the law, Ra Horquit, says, I will give you a war engine, and with it you will smite the peoples, etc. Now, in Scientological vernacular, Thetans are like those little people. We would call them personality complexes, inner voices, personality quirks, the simulated voice of other people that play in your head when you're doing something. All the psychic noise that goes on in your brain, those are conceptualized as Thetans. And the idea of reaching a new OT level is getting some of those Thetans to shut the fuck up, basically.
Which is the process called clearing them, like
Yes.
clearing them out of your psyche.
So you're also a Thetan. You're just like the higher powered Thetan.
Well, we have a body. Apparently, these thoughts can come from entities that are not other people as well.
Yeah, that's the alien spin they put on it. That at some point Xenu threw all of these alien species into a volcano, which they slumbered in the earth, and then the volcano blew up and all the Thetans got out and attached themselves to our soul and made us all neurotic and prone to accidents and not super duper awesome people that are ready for the ninth paradigm. Kiflam, brother. Are you ready?
So operational Thetan, as in like they become the operational Thetan?
Something like that. I can't claim to be an expert, but from what I've talked about with ex-Scientologists, that's the general idea that you become the conscious activator of your own mind, which, sounds pretty positive.
It's like
Yeah.
absorbing energy crystals from your enemies in a video game. Like, it'll up your stamina and power if you dissolve these false beings.
I mean, that's the science fiction spin on it. In principle, it actually makes a lot of sense. And what Ingo is saying is that once I got control over these inner voices, I was able to go anywhere with my mind, which makes sense and is believable. I mean, to be fair, the occult stuff we talk about on the show from different paradigms is more or less the same. You're trying to get your mind into a hyper state of focus, which allows you then to achieve what other people would call magic or miracles. It just so happens that from outside of Scientology, we're told that we should never go there because they'll take our money and they'll separate us from our families, and there seems to be some evidence to back that up. Please don't break my kneecaps if you're hearing this, David Miscavige.
Not shady at all.
It is interesting to point out that there's a number of Scientologists involved in this early remote viewing program.
I think that's significant enough to bring up for sure. And I also do think that there are practices that they have that have very real results. And that's part of what makes it so desirable, I guess, for some people.
I mean, it's similar to Catholicism. Like, there's definitely some stuff that they do that I totally vibe with, but at the very top of their hierarchy, the popes and the priests are all weird. So, same way I feel about Scientology.
I would legit pick up a book about auditing and like maybe apply it in my own way.
Well, it's
kind of
this
thing.
whole soft disclosure where a lot of information that is divulged to people, they put just enough of truth in it to where it works and it's actually like viable, but it's clouded with all of this other fluff that it misdirects you, basically.
Now, Ingo is saying that the OT level wasn't really that important. It was the auditing. And from what I've been told, auditing is where you sit in a room with an auditor and they ask you questions about your life and you get it all out on the table. You talk about every bad thing that's ever happened to you multiple times. You go all the way back the furthest you can in your memory. And by the time you're done, it's explained as like you have swept the floor of your brain and it is now completely vacant of all those lingering thoughts and smells of burnt toast, etc., etc.
Bro, sounds like a confessional.
I've heard it described as like searching for the roots of issues and finding the roots and pulling them, basically, which I guess would probably give you a bit of a vacant feeling after, like it's being cleared.
It doesn't stop there, though.
No, they're never done auditing.
Because what they have you do at that point, when you talk about like all your current life experiences, they might ask you what's in there now. And then you're like, well, I'm getting like a vision that I'm like a Roman soldier or I'm an American frontier person. And they are told that that's also like part of this whole process here. And that's like a sort of past life or a past experience that your soul's bound to for some reason. And you got to figure it out. That's a little bit more far out stuff. Maybe it's true. That's like, I don't know. I don't know what Scientologists know. I also swore that I'm going to respect all religions. So, more power to them. But at the same way, no.
Bro, you can't do all religions.
Yeah, all religions.
I think there's probably enough truth and enough bullshit in just about any religion for me to consider both sides. And as we'll discuss in the second half of the show, the process of auditing does enter the story, because if you are doing top secret stuff, well, you better be careful about what you tell your auditor. But if you'd like to hear the rest of the story, please visit www.patreon.com/thewholerabbit, where your monthly donation of just $5 will not only get you the extended, uncensored uncensored version of this episode, you'll get the extended uncensored version of all our episodes going back to before the before times. I'll send you a 5x5 vinyl sticker of our cover art, which is impervious to all sorts of weather and law enforcement. Just kidding. And you'll also get the secret keys to our Discord server where we can audit you all day long about your life decisions and then rat you out to the CIA.
And on our $10 tier, you can get access to our declassified documents.
Woo! Thank you again, Mr. Tim Hacker. And make sure to check out crypticchronicles.com. Thank you, everybody. Eat carrots and shoot lasers.
Pew, pew, pew.